She's like a sickness in my brain, a vision standing by the window pane. She ripples through the blinds and leaves me in a daze. It's in the way her body moves me, the way she grabs me and intoxicates, until the signals in my mind forget to operate. Fragile skull. I take my pleasure from my alcohol. She'll never give you any time at all. She just comes and goes, you know. And she's got me living in a chemical love. And
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to my channel. Thank you for joining me for another Coffee and Crime Time, the first video of 2021. It's kind of exciting. It's like a fresh start, maybe, but we can make it a fresh start. It's all subjective, right? So today we're talking about a case that's been requested a few different times, and since it's also our first video of 2021, I want to tell you that I really, really appreciate you all being here with me year after year. This month, the first month of 2021, I want to really focus on cases that don't get talked about a lot, cases that are still unsolved and need more awareness so that they can hopefully become solved. Now, some of these cases are going to be a little bit more well-known than others. Some of them are going to be virtually unknown to most of you. Some of these cases will have suspects who have been arrested, some do not, but they all remain unsolved, and I think they need a little more light to be shined on them, because I know that I sometimes cover more well-known cases because those are the ones that have the most information, and you guys know I love to put together a really detailed video for you with as much information as possible. But these cases that we're going to talk about this month, they really need to be solved. I would really like to feel that I'm using my platform to enact real change in the world and in people's lives, if possible. And I think I can pull all of this off while still giving you detailed and informative videos. But don't forget that in the description box for each of these videos, there's going to be information of how you can contact the law enforcement office that's responsible for each case. If you have tips, if you know something, that's kind of the point, that I think most of these cases, we can safely say that there's people out there that know something that would help solve them. So if you know something, if you saw something, if you heard something, don't be shy, call the number and report it. Today's video is also sponsored and brought to you by Helix Sleep. Helix is a premium mattress in a box company that makes mattresses to fit your unique needs and preferences based on your body type and your sleep style. And it's actually really easy and fun to find out which mattress is best for you. All you have to do is fill out the Helix Sleep Quiz. It's really easy, it's short, it's quick, and it asks questions about your preferred bed size, what position you like to sleep in, whether you like a firm or a soft or a medium mattress, and other personalized preferences. It was definitely time for me to get a new mattress. I've had mine for over 10 years, and I do have to admit that 20-something Stephanie was a lot more limber than 30-something Stephanie. I can tell you right now that I used to sleep on my back mainly. Now I'm a dedicated left side sleeper. I used to also wake up with no aches and pains in my 20s. I was a healthy young specimen, and now I wake up feeling as if someone used me as a punching bag throughout the night. So yeah, it was time for something new. So I took the quiz, and the quiz matched me to a mattress, the Midnight Luxe mattress. And this is a medium firm mattress. It's great for side sleepers. And Helix says it's also a great mattress if you're sharing a bed with someone else, because I guess, it's not all about me. I'm married. I have a husband who I sleep with in bed, and his comfort also matters. I can honestly say since getting the mattress and unpacking it and putting it on the bed, I've been sleeping so much better. And with this mattress, because it has support for side sleepers, my back, my neck, all the areas where I would feel really sore in the morning have felt so much better. And the amount of tossing and turning I'm doing at night is almost down to nothing. The only time I move now at night is when Bella wakes up with nightmares, because that has been an occurrence that's been going on lately, the past couple of weeks. I love that Helix also personalizes your mattress to what you need and want, because sleep sleep is so, so, so important. I get up early for work, and most of my days are spent sitting at a desk or in front of a camera, and I really can't afford to wake up feeling groggy and achy because sometimes it's hard to get motivated in the morning anyways, especially now that it's winter and it's like dark all the time. The best part is, though, that Helix will deliver your new mattress right to your front door for free, no shipping costs within the US. It comes rolled up in a box, and legit, when I saw the box, I was like, did they send me a pillow instead of a mattress? There's no way that this huge mattress is in there, but it was. Technology, man. And with your Helix sleep mattress, you also get a 100-night sleep trial, so you can make sure it's perfect for you and for your lifestyle, along with a 10-year warranty. So you really have nothing to lose except more sleep if you don't go check out Helix right now. If you use the link in the description box or go to helixsleep.com/Harlowe, HARLOWE, with an E on the end of it, you can get $200 off your Helix sleep mattress plus 2 free pillows. And I gotta say, their pillows are awesome too. They are my husband's new favorite pillows. He won't even touch the memory foam pillows I got him for Christmas last year. He loves these pillows. So check out the link in the description box and start enjoying getting to bed at night. Thank you so much to Helix for sponsoring this video, and thanks to all of you out there who understand we need sponsors to keep this channel going. Really appreciate it. Let's dive into the video. So before I sat down and made an outline, I went over in my head a few different ways that I could bring this case to you, different ways I could present it, since it does get a little complicated. Usually I go back and forth over whether I should present certain cases chronologically, which I personally prefer because it's easier for me as a viewer and a listener to follow that way. Sometimes I choose to kind of give you a short synopsis of the case and then go over the evidence. In my opinion, this case will be better told using the latter method, just because it does span over several years and is currently ongoing. So the victim in our case today was named Angelica Hadsell. She was known as AJ to her friends and most of her family. And she was an 18-year-old freshman at Longwood University, which is a liberal arts college in Farmville, Virginia. Now, AJ was originally from Norfolk, Virginia, which is where she was, home on spring break when she disappeared in March of 2015. The last time she was seen was on the morning of March 2nd at her mother Jennifer's home. Now, Jennifer said she was getting her 3 younger children ready for school that morning, and AJ was home. AJ was there in her room, and Jennifer said that morning AJ had excitedly left her room and joined her family in the kitchen, announcing that she'd found her 4-year-old sister's favorite blanket, which had apparently been missing for some time. They talked for a little bit, and then Jennifer left for work. Jennifer and AJ were reportedly very close, and they often texted throughout the day. And when Jennifer got home from work that afternoon, she said that her daughter wasn't home. So she texted her to ask, where she was, when she would be coming home. And the text message she received back from AJ said that AJ was out with friends. And it was described by Jennifer as being curt, very short, which was unlike AJ. Jennifer said, quote, "That was way out of character. She would tell me where she was or who she was with. That was off," end quote. Now, the text that followed from AJ to her mother, which continued until 4 a.m., they kept this same kind of pattern, abrupt, not giving a lot of information. When Jennifer got up the next morning and AJ still wasn't home and none of the text had revealed where she actually was, Jennifer said at first she thought AJ was maybe just stressed out, school, life, things like that. Maybe she needed some more time alone or with her friends. Now, the specifics of these texts between AJ and her mother have not been revealed. Jennifer claims she didn't really want to talk about any specific text, what AJ said, because she didn't want to interfere with an ongoing investigation. Now, later that afternoon, the text messages that Jennifer was getting from her daughter AJ stopped completely, and AJ was not responding at all. So Jennifer began calling her daughter's friends, and they all said that they hadn't heard from AJ and they didn't know where she was. One of AJ's friends had a father who worked for the Norfolk Police Department, and he suggested that Jennifer should call the police and file a missing persons report, which she did at about 9 p.m. the night of March 3rd. Jennifer would later testify in court that she'd also found a note that was allegedly from AJ, which was left at the house, and said, quote, "Dear Madre, with everything going on, it's a lot to deal with." End quote. Now, I personally can't find any further information on this note, whether that was the extent of what it said or if it was a longer note and, the rest of it just hasn't been released to the public yet. But Jennifer did say that she thought the handwriting in the note looked like her daughter AJ's handwriting. Now is a good time to talk about the father figures in AJ's life, and altogether there was 3 of them. Her biological father, a man named Mel Langer, who claimed that his relationship with AJ's mother, Jennifer, had unraveled just a few months after AJ was born. At the time of her disappearance, Langer was residing in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and on March 2nd, he says that Jennifer reached out to him via Facebook to ask if he'd heard from AJ, but he said he hadn't spoken to her since the prior year. Now, I'm not sure if he's referring to the fact that he hasn't spoken to AJ since the prior year or if he hadn't spoken to Jennifer since the prior year. But overall, I get the impression that Mel Langer was not a part of his daughter AJ's life at all. If he was, it was very long distance. Because according to Langer, for the past 18 years, AJ had been a distant part of his life. Once again, I'm not sure if that means that he didn't speak to her or talk to her or see her at all, or if it means he just rarely spoke to her and rarely saw her. But I mean, I think it's safe to say that they weren't super close, AJ and her father, Mel. So when AJ was very young, her mother, Jennifer, married another man named Zach Hoffer, and Hoffer claims to have helped raise AJ for 13 years. He told Channel 3, WTKR, quote, "I don't call her my daughter so much anymore. We've been estranged, but she is my daughter. I raised her and I love her. I've always loved her as a daughter," end quote. Now, it's worth noting because we do hear this word a lot. Estranged does not necessarily have like a negative connotation. It doesn't always mean something big and monumental happened to cause hatred or anger between 2 people. It can simply mean that a person is no longer close or affectionate to someone else. But in legal terms, when we're talking about spouses, for instance, the word does sometimes suggest a relationship that's characterized by hostility, anger, indifference. Zach was the male figure in her life for the most notable period of time, and he's since started a website about AJ titled I Am Her Father. I'll link it in the description box if you want to check it out, and he talks a lot about his life with AJ and her mother. And in my opinion, this is just my opinion, I don't know these people, but I think that you can tell that he really loved this little girl quite a bit. Zach's website is the biggest window into who AJ was. There's not a lot out there about her otherwise. There's not a lot of friends or family coming out and talking about her as a child or even her as a teenager, besides saying, she was wonderful, she was smart, she was a beautiful girl, she was nice to everyone, she didn't have any enemies, things like that, the typical things we hear when someone goes missing or is murdered. But he gives specifics. He talks about when she was a child, how she always carried around her little Tigger stuffed animal, how they went on multiple trips together from Montana to Arizona to Virginia, and he claimed that AJ loved the outdoors, and she had a very adventurous spirit, even as a young child. They first went rock climbing together when she was only 4 years old, and they climbed almost 20 feet together while he guided her and helped her along. AJ and Zach went back to this same place, the White Tank Mountains in Arizona, when AJ was 10, and he said at that time, she didn't need any help. He writes on his website, quote, "She was so brave, even when she was little. She would jump from the top of the car or some other high place into my arms. She was so fearless and adventurous," end quote. Zach also said that AJ was always an interesting little girl. She was always pondering these deep things that he couldn't understand, and she was smart as a whip. She learned things as if she already knew them. She loved animals, and she also had this habit as a child of wearing one pant leg down and the other up, or wearing only one sock. And this really struck a chord with me because my 4-year-old Bella, she does the same thing. The one pant leg up, the one pant leg down, one sock on her foot, the other sock, I have no idea where it is. AJ rode a bike without training wheels for the first time when she was 6. And when she first held her baby sister, Zach marveled at how careful and delicate she was with the baby. And she never complained about her little sister or sisters getting more attention. And she'd often pitch in to help out at home by changing diapers or cleaning up. AJ was also a leader, and she was this little organized multitasker. She always had her nose in a book, and in the 4th and 5th grade, she broke the record for reading. Her grades were always at the top of her class. She was kind and loving. She was just really good at anything that she put her mind to, from mountain climbing to dancing to sports to riding bikes. And for this next portion, I'm going to read directly from the website of Zach Hoffer so you can have this following information in his words. Quote, I feel compelled to tell the world that her name is not AJ Hadsell. She grew up as Angelica Marie Hoffer. That's her name. I need to tell the story about why she ended up with that name and why I wish it could be changed to anything but Hadsell. I had already adopted her, and permission was finally given when she was 8 by her biological father, who had left the country and never looked back to see how Angelica was. Unfortunately, the mother and I were in the throes of separation when permission was granted, and she decided she needed control. Their mother and I separated in February 2005. Their mother left the girls and I at home, and after she got her own place, we started sharing custody 50-50. In the summer of 2006, their mother took me to court to get full custody because she felt I needed to pay for the childcare that I wasn't using. Never mind that I had been paying more than half of the children's expenses up until that point. Well, God helped me in that hard time to retain 50-50 custody of my 3 girls. I also learned at that time that their mother told Angelica I wasn't her biological father. I cried to hear this as she casually told the moderator that she told Angelica months prior. I should have been a part of that conversation, or at least been told that she knew. She was almost 10 when she learned I wasn't biologically related to her, and she never let on that it bugged her. She hadn't met or talked to her biological dad since she was 1, so I was still daddy as far as she was concerned. I told her that it means even more that I chose to be her father, and that even Jesus was adopted by Joseph, who wasn't his biological father either. After the separation, there was always a little tension between their mother and I, but for the most part, we handled the 50-50 pretty good. The mom had been blowing up Angelica's phone all the time and planning stuff during my weekend. She was putting pressure on and making me feel I wasn't doing enough. All along, she had a plan to keep Angelica eventually. She had been building up to this. It's hard to break the bond between a father and a daughter, but if you keep etching away with lies and disparaging comments, then the child begins to feel that maybe their dad doesn't really care. On August 9th, 2009, Angelica's mom kept her when she was supposed to come back to me. It was her birthday. Me and her sisters had plans and had been spending the day preparing for her to return to have her birthday party. Neither the mom nor Angelica were answering their phones. Finally, the mom answered a text and said their phones weren't working. I felt this was a lie just because of the pressure she had been putting on Angelica in the prior months. I got angry, and when I got Angelica on the phone, I told her if she wanted to stay at her mom's, then go ahead. Well, 2 days later, I asked Angelica to come back. No response. The new chapter had begun. I continued to plead with her over unanswered emails and phone messages to come back. End quote. The last time Zach saw Angelica was in the summer of 2014, before she left for college. So these are some strained dynamics, obviously. This man had raised Angelica since she was 1. He went on to have more children with Jennifer, Angelica's mother, and he truly considered Angelica one of his own daughters. He wanted to adopt her. He got permission, obviously, from Jennifer to adopt her, and then he got permission from AJ's biological father, Mel, to adopt her. But that never happened because then issues arose between Zach and Jennifer, and you heard the rest from his own words. It wasn't great. And you can tell there's a lot more that he says on this website. His heart's absolutely broken. He says for a while she still called him daddy, but then that stopped, and it really broke his heart. So after separating from Zach Hoffer, Jennifer met a man named Wesley Hadsell in a bar in 2010. And within a month, Wesley had moved in with Jennifer and her 3 daughters, and they were married soon after that, and they had another child together, another daughter. So Wesley Hadsell adopted AJ, I guess, legally in 2012, and she took his last name. But in 2015, issues had started to arise in Jennifer and Wesley's marriage. About a week before AJ disappeared, Jennifer had kicked Wesley out of the home when she discovered that he'd started using cocaine again, and he'd been staying at a hotel. According to many sources, Wesley had a long list of criminal offenses starting in 1996. Some of these sources that talk about his criminal offenses, they just kind of go over vaguely and say, some burglaries, things like that. But according to Zach Hoffer's website, it goes far deeper. In January of 1996, there was 3 counts of burglary and grand larceny. In January of 1998, felony breaking and entering. March of 1998, felony restraint of a minor girl. October of 1998, forgery. November of 1998, forgery and second-degree burglary. December of 1998, 2 counts of forgery. August of 2000, several infractions while he was in prison, including threats and a sexual act. In August of 2005, he was charged with strangulation, kidnapping, and rape of his ex-wife. It is worth noting that he would later be acquitted by an Ohio court in 2018 of these charges, but it's a little more complicated, and we'll talk about it a little bit more in depth in a minute. Actually, I'll just kind of give you a quick synopsis now. So apparently it's reported that on August 26th of 2005, Wesley Hadsell was being sought in Delaware County, Ohio for the kidnapping and rape of Michelle Hadsell, who was his ex-wife at the time, and she was with him when he abandoned his car and led the police on a chase. The kidnapping was initially reported by Michelle's father after he got a panicked phone call from her, and then a patrolling state trooper ran the plate of Wesley Hadsell's car and discovered that the driver was wanted for rape, domestic violence, kidnapping, and assault. So there was a bunch of other allegations against Wesley Hadsell as well, such as an indecent phone call made in 1990 when he was just 12. In 1994, his own mother claimed that she was afraid of him due to his unpredictable behaviors. In 1996, he was arrested for arson to his home while his family was inside. In 2005, he separated from his wife due to drug abuse, stolen checks, and depression, and then he abducted this woman for 2 weeks, and during that time, she reported multiple rapes, robberies, violence, and threats to kill members of her family if she didn't comply and go along with it. Now, once again, he was later acquitted of these charges, and we'll talk about that more later. I think that some of these charges, especially the ones that he committed before the age of 18, he was a minor, so they were probably, hidden from the record. And I think that might also have something to do with the fact that even though he was arrested, he didn't really serve any time. So between 2005 and 2010, Wesley Hadsell was in prison where he stacked up 70 violations, including stabbing a man multiple times in the face, threatening bodily harm to others, disobeying orders, destruction of property 3 times, setting fires twice, possession of intoxicants, attempts and threats of suicide, attempted escape, amongst other things. And he was also diagnosed with a mood disorder and PTSD, and apparently he said he was hearing voices. So Zach claims that Jennifer had known Wesley for only 2 weeks before opening her home to him. And this was just 6 weeks after Wesley had been released from a maximum security prison. So Zach took Jennifer to family court because he felt that this wasn't a safe environment for his daughters, where Judge Joe Massey decided that Hadsell's violent criminal history was irrelevant. And even though Zach had already gotten written permission from AJ's biological father to adopt her, Wesley Hadsell was the one who was allowed to adopt her instead. So the name Judge Joe Massey sounds so familiar to me, as if he was a judge on another case that we've covered. And I did just now a quick Google on my phone because as I said the name, I was like, that sounds familiar, but I can't really find anything. So if you guys remember or you know why his name might sound familiar to me, I think he's on the Supreme Court now, but let me know in the comments. So in November of 2010, Judge Joe Massey dismissed Zach's petition for full custody, and Zach claims that even though he had partial custody after this, Angelica was kept from him against court orders. So that's a lot to digest, but needless to say, Zach felt that the introduction of Wesley Hadsell into AJ's life was not appropriate and could potentially put her and the other kids in danger. So when AJ first went missing, the Norfolk police made a statement to the public that they did not believe foul play was involved in her disappearance. She was 18. She was a college student. Many people just assumed, not necessarily that she'd run away, but she was just taking some time. She's legally an adult. She can do that, and she doesn't have to tell anybody where she is. However, several weeks later, police told News Channel 10 that they were no longer ruling out foul play since some new developments had arisen. Now, Wesley Hadsell, so just to be clear, because there's a lot of names, Wesley Hadsell is the guy who spent time in prison, who, married AJ's mother when he got out of prison, moved right into the house, is not only AJ's stepfather, but also adopted her. So he's her adopted father. He was initially interviewed by police on March 3rd, the day she went missing, and he told authorities that he'd seen AJ on the morning of March 2nd at Jennifer's house. He later changed his story, which he would do a lot in the following days, weeks, months, and he claimed that he had not actually physically seen her that morning, but he had the keys to her truck, which he put in the mailbox without going inside because his wife was mad at him and had kicked him out of the house. On March 4th, Wesley was interviewed by police again, and his story changed again. Now he was claiming that on the afternoon of March 2nd, he had seen AJ. He had met up with her at a one-stop food mart on Tidewater Drive around 12:30 in the afternoon, and at this point, he'd given her $200. Now, a coworker of Wesley's claimed that Wesley had left work that day saying he was going to meet with his daughter to give her money, but when he returned at 2 p.m., he was visibly agitated and he asked to have the rest of the day off. So police actually went to this one-stop food mart and they pulled the surveillance footage and they reviewed it and they saw no sign of this alleged meeting between Wesley and his daughter, AJ. They didn't even see any vehicles in the parking lot coming and going or parked there that resembled either AJ's vehicle or Wesley Hadsell's vehicle. Then something bizarre happened. A longtime friend of AJ's named Corey French found cut-up pieces of her debit card in the road near his house on March 5th. Now, Corey and AJ had dated briefly in middle school, but they'd been close friends ever since, and he lived only about a block away from her in Norfolk.
Where on Halpern did you find it?
Today, AJ's credit card was found by a friend laying on the street 1 block from her home.
So Corey obviously called the police to report what he had found. And this same day, Wesley Hadsell spoke with AJ's boyfriend, a man named Joshua Campbell. And Wesley asked Josh, where Corey French lived. Like, where does this kid live? What's the inside of his house look like? The layout of it. He asked Josh, what do you think about this kid, Corey? Because apparently Josh and Corey knew each other and they were friends, so he would have this information. Wesley also asked Josh if there was a security system or security cameras in Corey's home. And Joshua said he didn't know because he'd never looked for one. Now, the next day, Wesley called Joshua again and told him that he was going over to Corey's house to have a look around. And later that day, Joshua got a text from Wesley that said, "We have a problem." Another friend of AJ's, Andre Barr, would later testify that Wesley Hadsell told him he had entered Corey French's house through the side door and started looking around. And that was when he'd found AJ's school jacket hidden under some couch cushions in Corey's house. Wesley told Andre to go to the house and confirm that he'd actually seen what he had just seen, which Andre and a few other friends did, and they did find the jacket, at which point they called the police and told them what they'd found. So they told the police that they found the jacket, but they didn't tell the police anything else about how that jacket had come to be found. They basically said that they just found it in Corey's house. They did not say that Wesley Hadsell had broken into Corey's house first and found the jacket first. And that's not all. Joshua Campbell also testified that Wesley had gathered up a group of AJ's friends and told them some interesting things after this break-in into Corey's house. He admitted to breaking into Corey's house, and then he said he punched the family's 9-year-old St. Bernard in the head after it approached him, knocking the dog out. He then told AJ's friends that they should not, under any circumstances, tell anyone what he'd done because he was part of the Aryan Brotherhood, and if these kids betrayed him, he could have them taken care of.
Hadsell is convinced his daughter was taken against her will on March 2nd. So confident, he says he broke into the home of the person he suspects took his daughter.
I couldn't sit a minute away from where my daughter may have been.
Hadsell admits to spending roughly 18 minutes inside the home, tearing through trash cans, peeling back carpet, even punching the family's dog out of anger. He says he found AJ's jacket in a couch cushion.
I was just trying to make the evidence come to light. It's like I had the jacket and planted the jacket. I didn't know anything about that. It was the fact of the overwhelming information that led me there.
So, allegedly, he openly admits to punching a dog in the head and knocking it out, as well as allegedly admitting to being a part of a white supremacist group. I mean, I don't need to hear any more. Case closed, right? Electric chair. I'm kidding. Kind of. Let's continue. So once the police noticed that Wesley Hadsell couldn't keep his events of the day his stepdaughter went missing straight, and that he'd also broken into the home of one of her friends and allegedly found AJ's coat there, and then set up some of her other friends to find this incriminating evidence, but threatened them to not tell the police how they had come to find it. He obviously became highly suspicious. So they put him under surveillance and they started digging and kind of like investigating him. On March 20th, Wesley was interviewed by police again, and this time they asked him to explain the inconsistencies in his original stories. Wesley could not explain why the gas station surveillance hadn't captured his meeting with AJ, and he was also confronted with evidence that suggested AJ's phone was in the vicinity of his hotel at the time of her disappearance. Something else he could not explain. He also admitted to breaking into Corey French's house and finding the coat, but he said he'd only done it because he was sure Corey had something to do with what had happened to AJ, saying, quote, "As a concerned father, I couldn't sit around and do nothing," end quote.
Wesley Hadsell says he was arrested after being interrogated by police for more than 15 hours Friday.
They asked me where she was at. I know. Give them the answers. I can bring AJ home. Their words last night. Made mistakes, and, I've been out of trouble for over 10 years.
A changed man is what he says he's become. You can say with confidence that you have nothing to do with the disappearance of Angelica.
Yes, sir. I can say with 100% confidence that I told him last night, I don't know where she is. I don't know if anything happened to her or did not happen to her.
Now, I do want to mention that in the months following this, Corey French claims that Wesley Hadsell harassed him and his family. One day, Corey found a box sitting on his front porch, and when he opened it, he read the words, "We know," scribbled on the inside lid. And the box also contained a receipt that had Angelica's name on it. Corey French said, quote, "I was broken. He broke into my house, hit my dog, and could have put that jacket in my house," end quote. Yeah, I definitely say that it's plausible that Wesley Hadsell put that jacket there. Definitely highly probable. On March 20th, a white Chevy Astrovan belonging to Quality Plumbing and Mechanical Inc., which is Wesley's employer, was seized and transferred to the Norfolk Police Department's forensic bay. Now, Wesley had admitted that although this vehicle belonged to his employer, he was in possession of it and he was the only one who drove it. Inside that vehicle, police found a shovel with dirt on it. They found some gloves, like work gloves, as well as duct tape. They also found a Garmin GPS system inside the van, and this GPS system did not belong to the company, according to the affidavit, so it must have been Wesley's personal GPS device. And when they looked at the places that Wesley Hadsell had been in the beginning of March, they found that on March 4th, the GPS unit was located behind an abandoned residence that was located on Smith's Ferry Road in the city of Franklin on the North Carolina-Virginia border. Now, the GPS unit had remained at this location for approximately 20 minutes. According to neighbors, this house had not been lived in for several years, and there usually was nothing going on there. But within the past few weeks, there had been some activity there, such as a truck pulling into the carport and into the backyard late at night with its headlights off. So authorities went to this location on April 9th, and they found AJ's remains dumped in a ditch, face down, with her sweatpants pulled down partially. She'd also been partially buried and concealed with a wooden board or plank of some kind, and there appeared to be shovel marks in the dirt around her. She was wearing the same clothes that Wesley had told the police he'd last seen her wearing at that fictitious meeting at the gas station that nobody can find any proof of.
Yeah, right now within the past half hour here, we have learned that the remains found outside a home in Southampton County, outside a home on Smith's Ferry Road in Franklin, have been positively identified as those of missing 18-year-old Angelica AJ Hadsell. And I have been talking with AJ's mother within the past half hour. She has told me that this is a very emotional time for the family.
An autopsy was done on the remains, and it was concluded that she had died as a result of homicidal violence and heroin poisoning. So the autopsy report also said that asphyxia and/or strangulation could not be ruled out. However, everyone who knew AJ said she was not a drug user, including her mother, her close friends, her roommate from college, her sister. And the autopsy also said that there was no visible needle marks on her arms. So if you are a regular drug user, needle marks is something that you'll typically see if you've been doing it for a little while.
We've reported before, AJ's body was discovered at an abandoned house off Smith's Ferry Road in Southampton County. The autopsy case summary says her body was found concealed. These documents say it was under a piece of plywood board at the edge of a muddy creek adjacent to a shed behind that home. It also says her body was found lying face down. A medical examiner determined the 18-year-old died as a result of homicidal violence and acute heroin poisoning. Now, the paperwork says that she didn't have a drug use history or detectable needle marks.
After this, authorities searched the hotel room of Wesley Hadsell and discovered hidden in the AC vent of his room about 80 rounds of ammunition. And so he was arrested for this and charged with being a felon in possession of ammunition. Now, at first, Wesley said the ammo was not his, but in November of 2015, he pleaded guilty to the charge, and he was sentenced to 20 years in prison pursuant to the Armed Career Criminal Act, which increases the maximum sentence for an arrest like this from 10 to 15 years. And the presiding judge added on another 5. Later on, however, an appeals court sent the case back for resentencing, claiming that Hadsell did not qualify as a career criminal, and he was resentenced to 10 years. On June 18, 2018, Wesley was transferred to the Western Tidewater Regional Jail, and that same month he was found not guilty of abducting and raping his ex-wife Michelle 13 years before, but he was found guilty of assault, so I'm not exactly sure what happened in that case, why. It happened in 2005, and he was found not guilty in 2018, so I'm not sure what happened between 05 and 18 that, so drastically changed the case to where he was found not guilty of these charges, but either way, that's what happened. In July of 2018, Richard Patterson, an inmate who was also being held at the same facility as Wesley, wrote 2 letters to Norfolk police claiming that he had both a professional and personal relationship with Wesley that went back to before they'd both been housed in the same jail. Patterson also claimed he had direct knowledge of Angelica's death and that both Wesley and Angelica had been to his home in either January or February of 2015. But before giving any more information, he wanted immunity from whatever his part was in the crime. So authorities actually got a search warrant for Patterson's Toshiba laptop in an attempt to prove first, before anything, that he and Wesley had known each other prior to being incarcerated, and this wasn't just some prisoner trying to, connect himself to a case to get something out of it, to get some benefit to himself. This man also implied that he had some role in what happened to Angelica, so the police wanted to really determine what this role could have been, whether it was in her actual abduction, in her murder, or the cover-up afterwards. Now, Wesley Hadsell at this point was charged with the murder of his stepdaughter. While in jail, waiting for his trial, Wesley did some writing. He wrote letters to his mother saying that he wishes he had bond because he would go away for sure. He could live somewhere else and never have to worry, and they used this in court to show that he was, in fact, a flight risk. He also alleged that he felt his family on the outside was setting him up for the murder, and he promised his mother he would never go back to prison, and he would keep that promise at all costs. He also wrote a poem for his stepdaughter, Angelica, which read, quote, "An angel in wait, you wait no more. God takes the best. He proved that for sure." End quote. Now, once again, I'm not sure if this was the whole poem or if there was more to it. I don't know. But Wesley went on to say, quote, "I'm not a poet, but I love my daughter. I miss her, and it hurts, and it won't go away. I could sit here for years. I'm in prison here. I'll be in prison out there." End quote. Okay, so if you're in prison either way, why don't you just sit tight and stay put? In early 2020, Wesley Hadsell did go on trial for the murder of his stepdaughter. Prosecutors claimed that Wesley had AJ's cell phone in his possession and was sending messages to her family and friends, trying to throw everyone off his scent. So I do want to kind of tie back to the beginning of the video. AJ's mother, Jennifer, was getting texts from AJ. Her sister was getting texts from AJ. And everyone who's getting texts from her said it doesn't sound like these texts are coming from her. They're out of character. So I believe police are trying to say that Wesley had her phone and he was sending these texts to try and make people think that AJ was fine and just wanted to be alone. Prosecutors also alleged that Wesley planted evidence and interfered with the investigation, which I assume is the breaking into Corey French's house and planting the jacket, allegedly. Don't come for me if he did that. It could have already been there. He could have just genuinely gone in and found it and then sent other people to find it instead of being the hero and finding it himself, and then threatened those people to not tell the police how they'd found it. That could possibly have happened. And of course, we've already heard the other evidence against him. AJ's phone being near his hotel, his vehicle being at the place that her body was found, the shovel in his trunk, the gloves, the duct tape, his constantly changing stories, no proof of any of his stories. The prosecution did say, though, they couldn't really nail down motive. They weren't sure why he'd done it, so they could only speculate that he had wanted a sexual relationship with her, and when she turned him down, he killed her and threw her in a ditch with her pants pulled down like she was trash. Now, I don't think that this theory of the prosecution's comes from just, we don't have a motive, so let's just make one up. They have access to AJ's phone records, to Wesley's phone records, things like that. So I would have to assume that there was some sort of interaction or conversation that happened either between AJ and Wesley or between AJ and her friends that suggested maybe Wesley was getting a little creepy with her.
I say she's screaming help. She wants somebody to find her. She wants to come get her.
The family of Angelica Hadsell says there's suspicion and new facts surrounding the young woman's disappearance.
She was scared of a situation, and we didn't know about it.
Scared. AJ told friends she was on alert and in fear of a certain person in the weeks leading up to March 2nd. That's the last time anyone has seen her.
This person supposedly said that he wanted to hang out, and she said she didn't think it was a good idea.
AJ's cousin, Chelsea Zirkle, says she had confidential conversations with AJ.
She was more worried that this person would maybe do something.
Wesley Hadsell, AJ's father, says he believes he knows at least one of the people involved.
She didn't go on her own. She's not just sitting somewhere happy watching TV, watching this.
Text messages sent by AJ in late February are not sitting well with family and friends. She writes, quote, "I should probably stop texting him back," followed by, quote, "help," in all capital letters.
My daughter's missing, and it's destroying the family as far as our emotions.
Now, Wesley's defense lawyer argued that his client had absolutely nothing to do with what happened to AJ, and his defense team wanted to introduce certain writings of AJ's that suggested she was feeling depressed and had done this to herself. And I have a big problem with this because I get it. I get what you're trying to do here, but the way she was found, who does that to themselves? Right? Like, if you're going to take your own life, you're not going to afterwards throw yourself in a ditch and pull your pants down and cover yourself with a pallet. Wesley's defense team also called upon the governor of Virginia, Ralph Northam, who before he was governor happened to be AJ's doctor. And 2 months before her death, he'd apparently prescribed her antidepressants. Now, the prosecution countered this by bringing up medical records that showed the medication had been prescribed for headaches, not depression. But James Ellison, Wesley's lawyer, played a slideshow for the jury of social media posts and things that Angelica had written the day before, which was titled "Suicide is My Father." I have a big problem with this whole defense because, once again, the way she was found, even if she was feeling depressed, not everybody who feels depressed takes their own life. And the way she was found, it, to me, completely eliminates the possibility that she did this to herself. But what do I know? AJ's college roommate testified that she did not believe AJ was suicidal, and she'd also never known AJ to use drugs. AJ was always busy with softball or field hockey. She was also focusing on graduating a year early, so she was very, very busy and focused on school. Angelica's sister, who had shared a room with AJ in Norfolk for years, also testified that she'd never known AJ to use drugs or to be depressed. She was bright, positive, full of love. Now, when Jennifer was on the stand, Wesley's lawyer asked her about some of AJ's writings, which he alluded to having suicidal meanings. And Jennifer said she'd never talked to AJ about these writings because she saw them as the writings of a teenage girl, not suicidal in nature. Now, before this trial had started, both sides had agreed to certain stipulations, such as things that could and could not be talked about during the trial. But then, during the pretrial, when Jennifer Hadsell testified and Wesley realized that some aspects of his past criminal history might come up and become a problem for him, they called a recess and they requested to have different stipulations for the trial. His lawyer said, quote, "We sort of had an agreement and then Wesley changed his mind, and that's his right. He didn't feel comfortable going on with the agreement the way we made it." End quote. So the judge declared a mistrial, and that's sort of where we are now.
Well, Tom and Anita, this mistrial happened just 2.5 days into what was supposed to be a weeks-long trial, and there was really only only one day of testimony, but that one day was enough to trigger the chain of events that resulted in the Commonwealth's attorney requesting a mistrial. After granting the mistrial this afternoon, the judge told the jury they were free to go home.
Shocked. We were shocked. A lot of people were glad to go home. I wasn't. I was ready.
I think we're all disappointed. I think everybody is disappointed.
During Hadsell's wife Jennifer's testimony yesterday, she made a passing comment about his criminal history.
Then Wesley sort of realized that parts of his criminal record would come out. He felt uncomfortable about that.
The defense and prosecution had an agreement. The prosecution could use anything Hadsell mentioned about his criminal record to anyone not in law enforcement, so anything he said to the media, for example. In return, the defense could use evidence like AJ's calls, texts, and journal entries that they might not otherwise be able to use. Yesterday, Hadsell decided he wanted to do away with that agreement, which meant the Commonwealth would have to redact a lot of their evidence, and that takes time. So the judge granted a mistrial.
There's a million things that you prepare for in trial, and this thing had a million moving parts. And like I said, I think a lot of times things just sort of crystallize once you start the case. And I think that's what happened for him.
Due to COVID, the new trial has been continually pushed back, and his attorney, Wesley's attorney, has made it clear that they want certain things to be excluded from the new trial, such as statements made to witnesses, to police, and to reporters in the aftermath of AJ's death. What I'm getting from this is after AJ disappeared, and then Wesley started running his mouth to whoever would listen, he said things that a lawyer probably would have told him not to say. The stuff that he said to AJ's friends after he found the Corey French jacket, or AJ's jacket in Corey French's house. Things he said to the media. I mean, this guy nonstop wanted to talk to the media, even when he was sitting in jail before AJ had been found dead and while she was still missing, and he was in jail on this charge of the ammunition charge. He just was like, we need to find AJ. Like, that's what the focus has to be on, not on me. But he would just continually call these like cameras to come and interview him. So he definitely, he ran his mouth. He said a lot.
Wesley Hadsell's lawyer is now requesting a judge for more experts to help them build their case ahead of the upcoming trial, now set for this coming March. Interestingly, the only people allowed in the courtroom for today's hearing were the judge and Hadsell's defense team. That's because of new laws that went into effect July 1st regarding discovery in criminal cases. The laws are an attempt to mitigate the risk of disclosing the defense's trial strategy.
Honestly, it'll just help even the playing field is really what it's about.
Hadsell's lawyer, James Ellenson, says the new laws give more rights to criminal defendants. Today's closed hearing is an example of how the Democratic legislator in Richmond is tackling criminal justice reform.
The statute prohibits discussing the specifics of what occurred today, but I think the fact that we're even able to have a hearing such as this is part of a larger story about criminal justice reform in Virginia. I think that they're giving defendants more rights, and that I think it's all sort of tied in with this progressive Commonwealth attorneys movement.
If the defense ends up using the expert during the trial, then everything will be out in the open.
You know, there were times when Wesley was interviewed about AJ's disappearance before they knew that she was dead, and he spoke about her so often in the past tense that it definitely made everybody suspicious. My daughter was an awesome person, things like that. In a WTKR article, it says that Wesley gave several interviews with television stations and even an internet podcast. And during these interviews, he repeatedly talked about her in the past tense. And obviously, you know how people are, you know, us, this community. That's a dead giveaway that you know something, because typically you don't speak about people in the past tense if you don't know if they're gone. And then during these interviews, he would try to like throw suspicion off himself and throw it onto somebody else. He'd say, my daughter didn't have enemies, but let's say she had someone who liked her, loved her, obsessed about her. So he's trying to like make it seem like there's some third person out there besides himself and AJ who was involved in this. He said, I loved her. We were a family. I loved her. We were a family. I wanted to be a family, continually talking about her in past tense. And Jennifer Hadsell, AJ's mother, hasn't really come right out and said that she believes Wesley, her husband, is guilty of this. But she does say, you know, it could be possible. Anything could be possible. But until she has actual proof, she's not going to make any assumptions, which I think is probably healthy for her as the mother of this child, as the mother of AJ, because you don't want to get your hopes hung on something that you're going to see justice done and then have it not be done. And I mean, there is a good chance that Wesley Hadsell could go to court for this, because a new pretrial hearing is scheduled for January 27th this month, and a new trial should be starting in March. He could go to court for this, and a jury could find him innocent, and he could be let out, especially considering what kind of agreement they come to before trial, what they allow into the trial, what they allow the jury to hear. That's always very important. Sometimes in trials, you're not hearing everything that happened in the case. You're not getting all the information because the two sides make an agreement on what they're allowed to say or not say during the course of the trial. So I do want to hear from you now. What do you think of this case? Do you think there's a chance that Wesley Hadsell had nothing to do with this? Do you think that there's a chance anybody else could have been involved? Do you think that this Richard Patterson guy who is in jail with him is being truthful, or if he's just trying to personally get something out of it? Let me know in the comments. I always love hearing from you and seeing the discussions that arise in the comment section. As I said, in the description box, I've placed the link to Zach's website about AJ if you want to see more pictures of her and hear more about her life. I've also placed the information where you can call if you have information about what happened to AJ, if you know something. Obviously, anything would help. Thank you guys so much for being here with me today. Remember to follow me on Instagram and Twitter. Links are always in the description box. Remember to subscribe to my podcast, Crime Weekly. Link is also in the description box. Remember to subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. I see a lot of people watch sometimes, but not everyone subscribes. So make sure you subscribe so you'll be notified when I post a new video. And if you are already subscribed, just check and make sure you still are, because YouTube likes to unsubscribe people. Make sure you like the video if you liked it. Make sure you share it if you thought it was worth sharing. Stay kind and stay beautiful, and I'll see you very, very soon.
Water levee don't break now, and the bottle's going straight down, and that river runs deep, the mountains get steep, and the voices getting too loud. All these feelings I've buried, it's looking like a cemetery. They're going back from the grave, calling out my name, better say a Hail Mary. Well, you don't know how deep it goes until it's getting you slowly. So you got to let it go. I got blood on the strings.